Only a day after I dropped my last Star Wars Black Series bootleg clone trooper video, AliExpress dropped even more clone troopers, and I got them in. Now, I ordered these the very same day that they dropped. I posted over on Instagram and here on YouTube that, hey, you can order these, and it took exactly 2 weeks to the day for these to arrive at my doorstep. Honestly, the shipping from AliExpress has gotten insanely fast. It used to take 3 weeks, sometimes even 4 weeks, and now it's 2 weeks, which is just absolutely wonderful. Inside of this lovely shipping bag, we have a shipping box, which does help protect the figures, and I do appreciate that. Inside the box are the 2 figures. And there's no packaging, there's no box art with these. They just come to you exactly like this in little individual plastic bags. And what we have here are 2 501st ARF Troopers. Now, technically, there are 2 variations of the ARF Trooper that they released, both at the same time, both on the same day, but really the only difference is that one comes with a rocket launcher, and one comes with a DC-17 pistol, holster, and blaster. Now, this is a slightly different belt than we've gotten before because there is actually only one holster here on the right hip, and there is no holster on the left hip. I do actually appreciate that that is unique. I think double holsters on an ARF Trooper would look kind of silly, but the one holster works really well, and I think it fits really well with what these characters are as advanced recon troopers. Once again, these were dropped on AliExpress about 2 months after the last release, which was Jesse, Hardcase, and Apo. I did a review on those just recently. It was a little bit late, but just recently I reviewed those 3, and typically AliExpress does these in waves of 3 figures. They did 3 named characters last batch, and then before that they did Waxer, Boyle, and a 212th ARC Trooper. So it's interesting that there are only 2 figures here, but honestly it's not that big of a deal since we are getting a brand new helmet element as well as a brand new blaster element. Maybe that works into their production cost and that's why they only did 2. Who knows? It does save the wallet just a little bit to only order 2 of these, but they are still fairly reasonably priced at like $19 a piece. There is tax on top of that and maybe like a small shipping charge, but ultimately you're paying basically old Black Series prices like from 3 or 4 years ago. Now, as for the figures themselves, there's largely nothing new to go over here because the body mold is the same as what we've gotten before. The paint apps are the same as what we've gotten before, but there is this all-new ARF Trooper helmet, which we will talk about because it's really, really good looking. It's very nicely sculpted, and it makes me wonder if there's something like this coming from Hasbro that possibly this company has the molds to. But again, overall, this is just your standard new Black Series Clone Trooper body mold. It's painted in the 332nd scheme, as well as the weathering, so they're probably just reusing a bunch of those 332nd bodies. Maybe they had a bunch left over at the factory, because I can't imagine those sold terribly well, but either way, it's the same paint apps as the 332nd Ahsoka Trooper. The weathering's all the same. The shorter Clone Wars eye style is still there. The only difference with this particular variation is this little addition of the DC-17 blaster, pistol, and holster, but even that's just a slight variation on the belt that we've already seen before with the ARC Trooper and Apo and several other clones from this company, so that's nothing terribly new, just a little bit more unique, and I do appreciate that it does give you some diversity. Say you want to order both variations, you do have something that kind of differentiates these 2 troopers. Articulation remains largely the same. It's what we have come to expect with both Hasbro and AliExpress clone troopers. Again, I don't want to go over it too much because it is the same. It's all the same joints, it's the same mold, everything can bend the same way that we've seen before. The only difference with these is that the plastic quality feels a little bit softer. I wouldn't say that necessarily in a bad way. It just feels like there are fewer detents or softer detents in each joint. They move a lot smoother. They do hold their position well. There's nothing that I feel like will fall out of place. However, like I've mentioned in previous videos, that does mean that these feet do not have as strong of detents as an official Black Series figure. And so sometimes if you get them into a crazy pose on your shelf, that joint might just slowly sigh forward and cause the figure to topple over. I've only had it happen a couple times. It's not that big of a deal. It's worth pointing out, though, that these are softer jointed figures. The plastic overall is just a softer quality. But of course, the thing that everybody is most concerned about here is the new ARF Trooper helmet. This is the first time we've ever seen a 1/12 scale ARF Trooper, other than maybe, in the 3D printing community where they're all custom made. But this is the first injection molded, kinda semi-official Black Series ARF Trooper, and it looks pretty good, honestly. Like, it looks very solid. It represents the character well. Like with previous designs, especially from Hasbro, it does have more of an animated look, especially here in the mouthpiece. It's very simplified, just with a few little notes of detail and a little greeble there on the chin. But overall, the features look very animated, like they're pulled from the Clone Wars. But really, I don't mind it here. It looks really solid, especially on this newer articulated body. And honestly, even the realistic interpretations of the ARF Trooper helmet I've seen are pretty similar to this. You know, they're not far off from this, so this works. You know, this fits in very nicely with other Black Series figures. And what I really appreciate here is just the sheer number of paint apps that they've gone ahead and done. You have the blue striping, of course, but then you also have all these gray marks along the side, and even around to the back you have this little end cap painted gray, as well as this gray triangle. Those are details that I would expect to be printed on, say, a Hasbro official figure, but when it's a third-party bootleg, I'm just like, well, you know, normally they would skimp out on those things, but this company, whoever they are, has not done that here and gives us a really, really nice interpretation of the 501st ARF Trooper. Now, before we move on from the helmet, we do have to talk about one issue that does seem to be present with many copies, including the official images on the website, and that is that visor sometimes gets glued in very wonky positions. It's kind of interesting that I kind of went 50-50 here. I have a good copy and I have a wonky copy. You can see the groove there where that visor is meant to slot in a little bit lower and, of course, you know, sit closer to that visor. I do understand, though, why they would have done this in two separate pieces. It does allow them to print that visor and those stripes very cleanly without having to worry about avoiding the visor when they're doing the printing. And actually, I'm just now noticing they even printed the underside of the visor. That is a really, really nice detail that I just feel like they wouldn't need to do. Like, they don't need to do something that detailed, and they did, and I appreciate it. However, if you find yourself in possession of one of these wonky copies, these are just glued on with a little bit of glue on the side. So you can either heat that up, or really you can just kind of pop it off with your hand like I just did. And with it off, I guess if you want to repaint a custom figure, this would be a really good way to do that. But really, you can just pop it back on with a little bit of super glue or whatever. You can position it back into its more proper position, and it will look just as good as the other one. Another thing to note here is that this helmet is in fact hollow, and it does have a clone trooper head sculpted and glued inside underneath there. But honestly, you really don't notice. I think the scaling is pretty good here. It doesn't look oversized being on top of a clone trooper head. And of course, also, this company has gotten very good at getting those glued in there correctly. I've only ever gotten maybe one bad copy where the clone head was kind of glued in there at a weird angle, which affected the way the helmet looked. These do not have that problem, at least my copies don't, and really the only problem that I did encounter was with that visor. So we've looked at this variant. He's got the DC-17 pistol and holster, he's got the DC-17 carbine, and the DC-15 long rifle. Now let's take a look at the other variant. Once again, it's on the same body mold, the new Black Series clone mold. It's the 332nd paint job and everything. So really the body here is the same as the other trooper. It just lacks that little holster on the side, and he doesn't come with the extra blasters. He does, however, come with this all-new Clone Wars style rocket launcher. Now, like I said, I don't know where this company is getting these molds. I don't know if the ARF Trooper helmet and this rocket launcher are coming soon in the official Hasbro Black Series line, and they just have access to the molds, or maybe they're putting their presumably massive profits into making new helmet molds, new weapons, and just using, you know, the available content to design these weapons to match the Clone Wars. Either way, though, for what it is, I'm really impressed with the detail and design that goes into this. It's pretty accurate to the show. It might be a tad underscaled for a Black Series figure, but really I'm not too worried about that. It looks cool in a Clone Wars shelf, in a Clone Trooper lineup. You know, it looks nice to have them armed with some variety. Now, this is unfortunately cast in a pretty bendy plastic, so you might get yours shipped with a little bit of a bend in it, or if it's in storage for a while, or maybe even posed on a figure, you know, it might just get warped or whatever, but you can always reheat it, you can always reshape it. And I suppose there are also plenty of options online where people will 3D print this in a more accurate style, in a more accurate size, you know, all that stuff. So if you're looking for one of these rocket launchers, there are options out there on the market. However, I'm going to be a bit of a broken record here and say what I've always said about these bootleg Clone Troopers, and that is, if you are just a fan of Clone Troopers, if you're just a fan of Black Series, you don't want to go out and buy 3D printed parts, you don't want to have to paint your own customs, and you just want an ARF Trooper on the shelf to look really freaking awesome, then this is the perfect figure for you. This is a very low effort way to just get an awesome awesome clone trooper that's unique. It's something that Hasbro has not made yet, and maybe never will. So ultimately with figures like these, I will forgive a lot of inaccuracies and quality control issues just because they're third party, they're cheaper than Hasbro, and they work really well for casual collectors, people that don't need 100% accuracy and all that stuff, but just want cool clones on the shelf. For some quick comparisons here, we have the other third-party 501st Clone Trooper here on the right. You can see he looks right at home next to these other ARF Troopers. The blue on this 501st Trooper might be a little bit more muted. It's a little bit more satin as well, and obviously it lacks the weathering that the animated 332nd one has. You could always go in with some white paint and weather this one up a little bit just to have him fit in with these more weathered ARF Troopers. Or you could just say that the ARF Troopers, you know, because they're recon clones, they see a lot more gritty combat, and so that's why their armor is a little bit more weathered. On the left here, we have the official Hasbro Shock Trooper Commander. As you can see, they scale pretty well next to each other, though this one is just a little bit larger than the bootlegs. I noted that in my other videos as well. These guys are just like maybe 1 millimeter or 2 millimeters larger. That probably comes down to something with the molds, but ultimately it's very, very unnoticeable. Like, that is such a small little detail that never has bothered me or really done anything when it comes to lining these up in a row. So really, if you're adding these to an existing official Hasbro army, or if maybe you're army building these bootleg AliExpress clones, it doesn't matter. I think these all fit together really well with official and unofficial figures. So to wrap things up, I gotta say that these are another fine addition to the collection. While they certainly aren't groundbreaking or doing anything incredible, especially since the body deco on both these is what we've already seen before on the 332nd, that's nothing new, but these helmets with the all-new sculpt work and the really nice deco absolutely make these stand out and really bring some good variation to any clone army, especially if you favor the 501st. If you like the 501st, you will love this bootleg company because they have done more 501st clones than really any other, and Hasbro has missed so many opportunities when it comes to clone trooper variants and named characters and all that. So yeah, getting a couple ARF Troopers or even just one ARF Trooper to add to the collection and make a little bit more diversity with the clone army, that just is a win in my book. So until Hasbro gets their act together and produces more clones like this, I will be continuing to buy these bootleg clone troopers from AliExpress. But anyways, what are your thoughts on figures like this? Do you like them? Do you hate them? Have you bought one? Are you kind of on the fence? Leave it down in the comments. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on these clones. As always, there's a link down in the description to this listing where you can pick up these clones for yourself. There's also a link tree down there where I have links to a bunch of different stuff, including my Instagram where I post toy photography, toy content, and I drop links to things like this when they go live. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching. If you made it this far in the video, you're awesome, and have a wonderful evening, noon, or night, depending on when you're watching this video, of course. And as